Hello, my name is Corey Rogers, and today we will be discussing operant conditioning. So I know the term operant conditioning sounds pretty scientific and professional, but really it's used more often than we think. So as humans, we can have very unpredictable or unexpected behaviors, and may even surprise ourselves on occasion with how unpredictable our behaviors might be. However, anyone who has witnessed the development of a child knows that behaviors evolve as we learn, we observe, and then reproduce the desired actions that we saw. So these behaviors are often exhibited or best witnessed through young children, like my example I will be using tonight, which is my daughter. Amelia, can you say hi?
Hi.
She will help us demonstrate operant conditioning this evening. So you may think that it's a very tedious and scientific process, but really it happens every day without you even realizing it, even as adults. So let's get started and discuss how that might look. First of all, operant conditioning is based on the studies of behaviorist B.F. Skinner, who was the pioneer of behavioral studies and the father of applied behavior analysis. So operant conditioning is the most natural and frequently occurring of conditioning methods. There are a couple other conditioning methods that we won't discuss for time's sake, but this is the most naturally occurring as it is something that is socio-behavioral. So behaviors can be taught to you by your parents, teachers, or other figures of authority like caregivers. This occurs from teaching manners or the golden rule, or simply by enforcing rules that encourage positive or socially acceptable behaviors over negative ones. So you learn not to reproduce negative behaviors because there is an adverse consequence for these behaviors. You also learn to produce positive behaviors based on enforcement you receive, whether praise, privileges, prizes. For adults, it might be monetary gain, relationships, promotions. It can be any number of things you consider to be reinforcing. However, most behaviors are learned through observing, and these are done in the keys of 0 to 5 years. So most of this observation occurs in childhood, but it can still happen in adult as we are always ever evolving. We observe a behavior and the consequence of that behavior, and then to make a determination of whether we want to reproduce it. So for example, if I were leaning back in my chair and wiggling around and I fell off and bumped my elbow and started crying, you might think to yourself, oh, I should probably put my chair on the ground because of the adverse effect my consequence had on you and your desire to reproduce that behavior. Likewise, if I were to come into work early and use the correct parking spot and clock in time, and I received a promotion, that would then reinforce you to do the same in order to receive the same level of reinforcement. So there are two types of reinforcement, negative and positive. Most people, when they think of negative and positive, them with the terms good and bad. In this case, we're strictly speaking mathematically and logically, in that negative means to subtract and positive means to add. So negative reinforcement, using that terminology, is reinforcement that negates or takes away an undesirable behavior. For example, grounding is a common thing that parents do with children, timeouts, or any other stereotypical punitive consequences that are given as a result of an action. There is also positive reinforcement, which adds a desirable behavior. For example, rewarding a child for doing chores is another common way parents seek to add the production of responsible behaviors. For example, my daughter is reinforced every time she says, "Excuse me." Yes, sweetie?
Mom, you happy?
I am very happy. I love how you said, "Excuse me." Thank you so much.
I want those.
You would like one of those. So right now I am giving my daughter, for the sake of the speech, a piece of candy to demonstrate the reinforcement. Normally it would just be social praise. It would be a high five, or it would be a hug, or it would be lots of social praise. But for the sake of this, we will receive a piece of candy. Good job saying excuse me.
It's not blue.
It's white. Through giving her the piece of candy, which is something that she desires and is highly reinforcing, she is then more likely to reproduce that behavior of saying excuse me when I am talking. It's just as a small example of what positive reinforcement is. I am adding a desirable behavior as opposed to taking away a nasty behavior that I may not like. So instead of her saying excuse me and she's poking me or she's screaming, I would then reinforce when she says excuse me, because I'm then negating the behaviors I do not like. The screaming, the yelling. So in a sense, you're reinforcing both, as opposed to where most people think of reinforcer, they think I am making that behavior stronger. When in essence that's correct, because while you're making one behavior stronger, you're making the other weaker, and it will eventually dissipate and be non-existent. So along with reinforcers, there are specific schedules of reinforcement that scientists have been able to discern from one another. Each schedule is used in a different scenario. Good job saying excuse me, thank you. And many of them you do or do not do, or can even have done to you without you even realizing it, because they happen so frequently. The first is reinforcement. This is the least naturally occurring reinforcement, as it is almost nearly impossible in a natural environment to catch every single time a behavior is done and to reinforce it. This is most commonly done in scientific or research studies or applied behavior analysis or other therapies where it's a very contrived situation. For example, every time a child sits and plays quietly, or every time a child says excuse me, or every time a child signs bathroom. Good job saying excuse me. Thank you. Would be a very contrived situation, but would be an example of continual reinforcement. Fixed ratio reinforcement is a schedule where the response is reinforced only after a specified number of reinforcers. So for example, my daughter has a chore chart, and every day she has to make her bread, brush her teeth, and so forth. Because there is one block for every day, she is reinforced every 2 nights where she can cash out for a special activity. She can stay up for bed, she can watch a movie, etc. However, she knows that every time she receives 2 gold stars in all of her columns, then she can get her prize. So this schedule produces a high ratio of success. Good job saying excuse me.
Yay!
Thank you. It produces a high and steady rate of responding due to the predicted amount of reinforcement. The child or the adult knows when they're going to do this. A great real life example is a paycheck for adults. You know that every 2 weeks, 1 month, or even every week, you are going to be paid for the job you did. You are being reinforced on a fixed ratio basis. This can be done in a child sense every time a child successfully makes their bed every couple days, or every time. Great job. I love how you're saying excuse me.
Yeah!
So far, this is an example of continuous reinforcement. As this continues, I will begin to fade the reinforcement into the other forms that I'm about to speak to you about. Alright, so the next schedule we're going to talk about is varied ratio schedules. These occur when a response is reinforced after an unpredicted number of responses. So this is the one I'm going to start doing. No longer am I going to reinforce her every time she says excuse me. I might reinforce it every couple, so on and so forth. This is happening when you fade your prompts and everything. Yes, sweetie? You can have a piece of candy in a minute. Okay? What's happening now is called an extinction burst. She might exhibit more behaviors. Good job saying excuse me. High five. Thank you so much. Candy in a minute.
Those.
This is going to happen every time when you change the schedule. The behavior is going to get worse before it gets better because of the change in unpredictability. This is also very highly reinforcing, which is why it works for good job saying excuse me. Thank you so much. This is highly reinforcing for gamblers. When you think of Russian roulette or craps or especially the slot machines, this is based off of psychology of a variable schedule of reinforcement. So you might pull the slot one time and receive nothing. You were not reinforced for that pull, but you will continue to pull it in hopes that you're going to be reinforced. The unpredictability of what's going to happen next, good job saying excuse me, not yet, is what's going to keep you pulling the slot. This is why gambling works so well. Good job saying excuse me. As you can tell, no longer am I continuing to reinforce every time. Nice job, she says, excuse me. I'm going to do it every couple times. Good job. Because she's hoping the candy comes soon, she's going to continue to ask, excuse me, in hopes of receiving the reinforcement she desires. Right here. All right, so if you know the reward is imminent but cannot predict when, you're more likely to continue the behavior in hopes of receiving that reinforcement, which is why it works so well in casinos. All right, so fixed interval schedule are those that are first response is rewarded only after a specified amount of time has elapsed. So instead of using an event or a behavior, you're using a time-based quality as well as the behavior. So for example, as long as my daughter can sit quietly every 30 seconds, she will be reinforced. Leah, can you sit down on the floor?
Hello.
It's time to be. Good job. 1, 2, nope, sit down on the floor.
Why do that?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good job. In order to continue reinforcing that, I would have to catch her every 10 to 30 seconds or whatever specified amount of time I gave her and reinforce that every time. This is also very unnatural, as it is hard for people to figure out and keep track of the times that someone is doing something, and again, usually happens in contrived situations. Another real-life example might be every time a child exhibits the desired behavior for 1 minute that they receive a token or a piece of candy. So if your child is having a hard time sitting still at the table, you might say, for every 2 minutes that you sit still, you can stay up an extra 15 minutes at bedtime, or however it works. It's time-based. Good job saying excuse me. All right. So, a variable interval schedule occurs when a response is rewarded after an unpredictable amount of time has passed. So, for example, I might tell my daughter, Nelia, now it is time to be quiet and follow directions. Can you put your toys away for me?
Why?
Can you put them in that bag over there, please? Thank you. But I have not told her how long I intend to have her behave or how long I intend to have her clean up. But I will reinforce at a different interval each time. I might reinforce every 10 seconds she's on task, or I might reinforce every 5 minutes that she is on task. Again, this is the same as the variable ratio, but instead of it being behavior-based, it's time-based. So like the theory of the slot machines, you don't know when it's coming next. This is the same in essence, where she doesn't know, good job, she does not know when the reinforcer is coming next because I do it at different times each time. The method of delivery is also more naturally occurring than others because it happens whenever you catch it or whenever you have time, and it isn't as contrived. The schedule produces a slow, steady, most successful response rate. So if you're having difficulty with conditioning a specific behavior in either a child, a spouse, or anybody really, this is the most successful method, is praising them or reinforcing them at different times or availabilities. So, instead of reinforcing a child for every minute they're sitting at a table quietly, you might change it to every 5 minutes or 3 minutes. Alright, so now that you know what operant conditioning is and just how it's used by behaviorists and scientists, you know that it's easily done at home and that it even happens when you don't even realize it. So you might begin to recognize how often you use it and how often it's done to you in your everyday life. A simple smile, a tip, paycheck, parking ticket, honk at a red light, good job, or anything is all considered reinforcing and tells you whether you want to produce that behavior again or not. This is definitely, good job. These are all examples of operant conditioning that continually shape our ever-evolving behaviors as human beings. Alright, so thank you for being my model. Can you say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Say thank you.
Thank you.